Why, hello there, you beautiful soul. What's up? How's it going? Hopefully, for you, it's going really great. Hopefully, it's going really, really great. But if it's not, sadly, if you've had a bad day, I'm sorry. I wish it was better for you. But you are here. And you are allowing me, myself and I, to turn that frown upside down. To turn whatever has been going on in your life that has been negative and turning it into a positive. Because you are allowing me to go ahead once again, for now the 12th episode, and steal your time. Yes, indeed. I am stealing your time. That time you will never get back, and neither will I. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride, because it is a ride that is all about positivity. But not too much positivity. Can't have too much of it. Cannot have too much of a good thing, because then we'll get tired of it. So we got to be toxic every once in a while. We got to be negative every once in a while so we can balance it out. But don't bring that negativity and don't bring that toxicity to this show, because I try not to. Even though I can sometimes be a toxic asshole. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another episode. Are you sick of seeing me? Welcome to episode number 12. Yes, indeed, the 12th episode of the Stealing Your Time podcast here on YouTube, SoundCloud, and Spotify. I am your host, Sean Kingston. No, I'm kidding. I'm not Sean Kingston. I am Sean. Steeler Sean, to be exact. And hopefully you guys are having a phenomenal Saturday. It is February 13th, 2021. We are just plowing through this year like crazy. This is the third episode that I've done in like the last week. And I actually just woke up a little over an hour ago, so my voice does kind of seem a little bit, it does kind of sound like I'm sick, but I am, waking up still kind of, coming alive of sorts, because, sleep is fun and everything. But here we are, just past the noon hour. I would originally be working right now at the Jimmy Jam, but one of my coworkers had a conflict come up and we decided to switch. And here I am doing the podcast and getting it out to you guys on this lovely, but not so lovely Saturday early afternoon. And the reason why it is not so lovely is because it is absolutely freaking cold out. It is absolutely freaking cold out. It has been freezing for like the last week and a half or so. I don't think it's gone above double digits. Apparently the whole nation, except for, California and Texas and Florida, the hot spots of, people. Apparently everywhere else is like feeling the same effect. It is just freezing as fuck as far as the eye can see. It's supposed to only be a high of like -8 tomorrow, which is Sunday. And that's not even factoring in wind chill. Yeah. It is just a lovely, lovely time up here in the Midwest. It really, truly is. Puxatawny Phil, you're an asshole, my friend. You promised 6 weeks of winter. You did not mean the worst weeks to come, because it has not been this bad weather-wise this whole winter season. It just has not. So I blame you and your gopher ass for cursing the whole freaking country with cold as fuck weather. You fake news bastard. But anyways, there's the toxicity I was talking about. Today, once again, as promised, if you listened and or watched episode number 11, which if you have not already, or if you've not done so, why are you watching this before that? Are you a psychopath? Let me answer that question. Yes, you are. Go listen and or watch that. It's on the channels. It's on Spotify, all that good stuff. If you're on Spotify or SoundCloud or YouTube, go check that out. But I promised you guys that I would not talk about sports in this episode because that's literally like all we've been talking about, all I've been talking about literally for like the last 2 months. And I'm sure many of you are like, oh my God, can you talk about something else? Yes, indeed, we are talking about something else. But I will say this. It technically is not like sport related. I mean, if you see the title, this isn't classified by many as being a sport, even though it really is. And we are going to go ahead and we are going to talk at length today about professional wrestling. Oh, yes. Oh, yes, indeed. I'm sure many of you probably just clicked away and or, went to go listen to some other podcast because that is what we are going to be talking about here today for this episode number 12 of the podcast. I am going to be talking about wrestling and how it has influenced me as a person, how it influenced me growing up, how it has influenced me today. Pretty much the whole grand scope. We're not going to go into super detail today because that could take literally days. You could talk about this for days. I'm going to try to jam pack as much as I can in about an hour or so, a little bit over an hour, I'm hoping. But yes, that is what we are going to talk about here today. Before we talk about that, I'm going to talk about, well, first of all, you can see this lovely little board here that we got. Picked this bad boy up at Walmart. Just kind of some decorations to add behind here. So, my background isn't, super boring. But yes, episode number 12. And actually, you can go ahead. This thing has LED lights in it. I don't have it plugged in. But, whenever we do a night podcast again, we'll have to plug this in. And we're going to have to party it up. So, yeah. Pick that bad boy up. Once again, just kind of for aesthetics. As my webcam kind of trips out. Come on, there we go. Gotta love when my webcam just goes all blurry on you. But anyways, first and foremost, before we talk about wrestling in great detail here today, I am going to talk about first being back streaming on Twitch. Now, yes, I am streaming. I stream on Twitch, twitch.tv/SteelerShawn. Go follow me over there if you have not already. I am grinding my way toward becoming an affiliate and grinding my way to becoming a Twitch partner and all that good stuff. So go give me a follow over there. I'll link that down below in the description if you're watching on YouTube. But if you're listening on Spotify or SoundCloud, just go to Twitch and search SteelerShawn. And I only have like 26 followers or 27 followers. So there's my channel there. Go check me out there. But yes, I have been streaming kind of sort of consistently, I would say, over the last like week and a half. And ladies and gentlemen, I cannot begin to describe just how much fun I have been having streaming on Twitch. The YouTube content has kind of taken a little bit of a step back because of this. And I apologize for that because I've been streaming a lot more and putting a lot more time and effort into that than I have into putting into YouTube content. And that kind of seems to be a common thing amongst a lot of content creators is, we're trying to pump out content on all these different types of platforms, whether it be YouTube, Twitch, TikTok for all you degenerates out there, Instagram, whatever, right? And what I've been, realizing over the last, week and a half or so that I've been really, grinding a lot on Twitch is that it is very, very, very difficult to find a balance between putting out an appropriate amount of YouTube content whilst also streaming a lot on Twitch. It is extremely, extremely difficult to put in time and effort on both platforms. It really is. Because you have to put in so much time and effort, at least for me anyways, because I'm still a very, very amateur video editor. I have to put in more time than what a professional video editor obviously would do when making a video, because I am slowly but surely working the ranks and, starting to become better at editing in Premiere Pro, which is what I use to edit my videos. I use Premiere Pro, I use Photoshop, I use the whole 9 yards there because it is the most efficient for me. But it takes time, it takes effort, it takes commitment to pump out YouTube content. It really does. And Twitch is just a whole nother beast. It really, really is. But it has been just such a fun time for me. I have had so much fun streaming Madden, as frustrating as it has been. Also, I have been streaming a new game that I've been playing that my buddies recommended to me. It's called Getting Over It. It is, I believe, just a PC game. That game is absolutely cracked. It's on Steam, called Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy. It is a game that is supposed to make you rage, but so far it has kind of accomplished that. But it is such an amazing and such a fun game, such a breath of fresh air from the shit box that is Madden 21. But those have been the two games that I've been streaming. And guys, it has just been a blast. I keep saying this over and over. I keep repeating myself, but it has just been so much fun streaming on a somewhat consistent basis, because I did make a Twitch schedule. I did kind of map out a schedule of like, okay, I have time. I have these times available on these days of the week. I can stream yada, yada, yada here, right? I have somewhat stuck to the schedule, and I have somewhat not stuck to the schedule. I'm not really a guy that like sticks to a schedule all that well, especially one that I make myself, which is something I need to definitely improve on as a person and as a human being. But I have stuck somewhat consistently to the schedule, and like right now, I wish I could be streaming right now. Honestly, I really wish I could. I think honestly, after I get done doing this episode and putting it out for you guys on all the platforms that I do, YouTube, SoundCloud, and Spotify, I'm probably going to stream for a little bit because I have to go to work today at 5. I'm probably going to stream a little bit before that. And then I'm probably going to stream tonight. I'm telling you, once you get in the rhythm, have the dedication, have the time on your hands to stream on Twitch, it is some of the most fun you'll have. It really is. And if you're strongly considering, if you want to pull the trigger on streaming or making any YouTube content at all, just do it. That's my advice. Just full send it and do it. Because you will not look back. you will not look back. Because I am not looking back at all ever again on Twitch. I am going to be streaming for as long as streaming shall live. Because I've got my feet soaked in it, and I don't want my feet getting dried. So, yes, indeed, we are on the Twitch grind. It is a very steady, very slow grind, but like with anything in the entire universe, time and effort and hard work will pay off eventually. And that's what I'm hoping. Hopefully we can achieve becoming an affiliate of Twitch. Hopefully which I have to get to 50 followers. That's like the next checkpoint of, getting to be an affiliate is to get to 50 followers, which I believe I can definitely do so hopefully soon. And then there's a whole other bucket list of things that you have to check off to become a partner. But that is not in the sites nearby. That is way down the line in the future. So I'm only focusing on the now. So yes, the Twitch grind has been so much fun for me. If you're on the fence about potentially wanting to stream, now's better than ever, especially with, the Rona. Everyone is still at home, even though we're slowly but surely working our way back to normal. It's still a better time than ever to get involved in the Twitch business. So yes, just wanted to update you guys on that. Once again, go check me out on Twitch. It is the same username as my YouTube channel. So yes, follow me over there, please. Greatly appreciate it. Anyways, moving on then to our main focus of discussion here today on episode number 12 of the podcast. Once again, we are going to be talking in great detail about professional wrestling and how it has influenced my life, how it influenced my life growing up, how it's influencing my life today, all that good stuff. So first and foremost, I guess I'll go ahead and I will talk about how I first became a wrestling fan and kind of a stigma of why I've kind of kept this a secret for so long. So, I remember first watching wrestling, I think it was around 2002, 2003, around when I was like 4, 5, 6 years old, around that age range. That's when I first started, watching wrestling. Because, once again, if you harken back all the way to the pilot episode of the podcast, if you remember, all the way back then, 11 episodes ago, I had mentioned that I grew up only with about 30 or 35 channels on TV. Because, hey, we're here in the middle of bumfuck nowhere, Iowa. We couldn't really afford DirecTV. So we got, just basic ass cable. And one of those channels that we ended up getting was, I believe, was TNN. TNN was a Turner Network television station. It is now, I think it's evolved into something else, but it used to be, no, it wasn't a Turner. Or was it a Turner? I don't know. TNN. But anyways, that was one of the channels that we got, right? And back around 2002, that is when wrestling was on TNN. Or specifically, the WWE. Yes, indeed, WWE. And the rest, as they say, was history, because I can't remember the exact moment that I, was quote unquote addicted to wrestling, but that was just around the time that I just started tuning in. But I could fondly remember tuning in and, generate memories of tuning in. That was it. It was around that time frame. It's around that time frame. And the stigma that I was talking about, the stigma of why I was why I'm so hesitant, and why I'm like, ooh, I don't, like, younger me would not want to talk about this, but for some weird reason, when I was, growing up, it just, I don't know, for some reason, it was just kind of, you were kind of looked at weird around this area of the country if you liked wrestling. I don't know. That's just how I felt. I feel I was such a huge, so much of a fan of it that I was like, not a whole lot of other people around my living area like this stuff, right? Like, really only a couple other of my, close childhood friends liked wrestling as much as I did. But no one else really did. So, being young, I was just like, oh, I don't want to talk about, I don't want to say that I'm a wrestling fan in front of, this person and this person. I just don't, I don't feel comfortable because they don't like it. So that kind of got me a little bit shook, I guess. And once again, I don't know the exact reason why this was. Maybe it's just because I was scared. Maybe I was just, hesitant. But that was kind of the reality of being a wrestling fan growing up where I did. I just didn't want to show it, I guess. Obviously, my parents do because, shit, we watched it, bought me all this crap, So they definitely know. But really, other than, a couple individuals, no one really knew. And once again, don't know why. Don't know why. But once again, that was just me being weird back in the day. So, wrestling indeed. It has amazed me just how incredibly mainstream a lot of wrestling has become over the last several years. It really has become just, even though it's not anywhere near as popular as it once was. Because back in the late 90s, in the early 2000s, 2000, 2001, that was the dubbed Attitude Era. That was the peak of wrestling. And there will probably never come a time ever in our lives that wrestling will see the popularity that it did back in the day. Because it was white hot. But it has amazed me just how mainstream a lot of the stuff that we saw back in the late 90s has become in front of our very eyes here in 2021. Now, things are a lot different because back in, 20, 21 years ago, the amount of fucks that could be given, you could not count on a single hand. They did not give a flying fuck about what they said, about what was produced, all that good stuff. But now today, it's more of a sport. even though it's technically WWE is dubbed sports entertainment, whatever, because it is indeed a sport. And if you don't think it is a sport, if you do not think that some of these freak athletes who train and grind maybe more than some of your favorite athletes do, if you don't think it is a sport, you can kindly fuck off. Because it is 100% a sport. And I will take that sentiment and die on the hill with it. Because it is. And there's just no way you're going to convince me otherwise. You can try, but you're not gonna. Because these individuals, especially before the pandemic, literally traveled constantly 300 days of the year and bump around like it's no tomorrow. So, that's my little 2 cents on that. Getting back into how it influenced me growing up. Once again, when you only have 35 channels and you don't watch all 35 channels, obviously, the amount of wrestling, amount of WWE that I absorbed as a child was a lot. And that's, being generous. A lot. Every Monday night, tune into Monday Night Raw, because that's the flagship live show that they put on, and they have been putting on every Monday night for like the last 20 or 25 years. You tune into that, right? We tuned into that. We watched, I think it was like 2 hours long. Now it's like, I think it's been 3 hours for like the last 7 or 8 years, maybe even longer than that. We tuned into that, watched that on Monday nights. There's another show called SmackDown as well, but that's not on cable television. That's on network television. Sometimes before growing up, it was on cable, and we would have to, my dad would actually go ahead and tape it on VHS, and I would watch it on Saturday morning because they would play it on a channel, not live, because this show they actually taped this show back in the day. They taped it on Tuesdays, and then they aired it on Thursday/Friday because they've kind of altered in between Thursday and Friday. So my dad would VHS record an episode of SmackDown so I could watch it on Saturday morning. So I would watch that. There was also a couple other shows as well that weren't very, significant to the product. They were kind of just there that I also tuned in as well. It's a lot of content. It's a lot that I took in, and a lot that influenced me as I was a kid. Because literally, that's basically what I watched. Again, we watched SportsCenter. We watched NFL games. We watched WWE. We watched nightly news. We watched NASCAR. That's it, for the most part. And I'll probably talk about NASCAR on another episode of the podcast. I know you guys probably just are so excited about that, right? Oh yeah, another left turn. But that is another thing that was very influential on my childhood. Was NASCAR, believe it or not. So, once again, going back to how it influenced me, when you were a kid and you were going to a swimming pool, it was a hot summer day, you went to the swimming pool, yada, yada, yada. Well, and they have the big old diving boards, right? They have a small diving board, and they got the big kahuna diving board. Well, it was wrestling had so much of an impact on me that like pretty much every single, thing, every single dive attempt that I had off of a diving board was probably going to imitate a wrestler's like finishing move. I know, right? That's pretty fucking nerdy. That's pretty freaking nerdy, to say the least. Cause, we had like the frog splash, we had the elbow drop from the top rope, we had the swanton bomb, we had, just so many different finishing moves. That's how much of an impact it really had on me. Is that I would try to imitate their art. Life imitating art, essentially. No, call me a geek, call me a nerd all you want. I don't give a shit. So, man, once again, this is just something I could talk about for just so long. I could talk about for hours and hours and hours, it feels like, about wrestling. I really could. I really, really could. Because there's just been so much that I have absorbed in my life. And especially growing up and, over the years, that it's just something that I could talk about literally for days. I could literally probably make about 10 or so episodes alone just talking about wrestling. Dead ass. But for the sake of time, we're going to keep it going. So, wrestling is cool and all, but, there's the people behind the wrestling, right? The wrestlers themselves. Now, once again, I started watching around 2002, and we all know probably the two most popular and the two most influential wrestlers that have ever stepped foot on the planet. And one of them you should definitely know, especially if you've watched any movie ever in the last 5 or so years. I am talking about Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and then his counterpart, Stone Cold Steve Austin. If you were to ask me who are the faces of wrestling, it is those two. And it harkens back once again to the late 90s, because these were the two that made wrestling into what it is today. It made it cool. It made it mainstream. It made it so freaking popular that once again, there's not going to be another popularity outbreak like there was in the 90s, because I cannot begin to describe to you guys how insane that time period was, because, and obviously it just wasn't these two, but these two were the flag bearers. These two carried the load. These two were the most influential and the most popular guys in the wrestling industry in the late 90s. And it's very, very, very difficult to disagree, because they are two of the best to ever step foot on this planet. Now, The Rock, what can't there be said about The Rock? The Rock is honestly one of the greatest human beings to ever step foot, because this man played college football. You know, his father and his grandfather grew up in the wrestling industry, and they wrestled. They were very, very popular wrestlers back all the way, you know, in the boomer ages. And then The Rock, you know, plays college football. He trains the wrestler, becomes a wrestler, turns into one of the biggest stars the wrestling industry has ever seen. And now he is one of the biggest Hollywood stars. I'm pretty sure he's still the highest paid actor in the world right now. Still, I think. I don't know if that's true or not, because, I mean, that was true like a year ago or so, but I don't know. Obviously, with COVID and everything, that's affected the movie industry drastically, I would imagine. But the last time I knew, he was the highest paid actor on the planet. And it's very hard to see, or it's not very hard to see why, because he is probably the most charismatic, one of the craziest mofos as far as work ethic and just being the best you can be that there ever has been on this planet. Because, I mean, I don't even know how to describe it, because it's still all unfolding in front of our eyes. He's still very much alive and well. He is just absolutely, completely 3,000,000,000% ripped out of our minds. He wakes up probably like 4 or 5 a.m. every day, goes to the gym, and just gets gains. And then he's like, "Oh, hey, I'm gonna film this movie in the afternoon." So, but this man couldn't be where he is today, honestly, without what he did in the late 90s in wrestling with his counterpart, Stone Cold Steve Austin. Stone Cold Steve Austin. The phrase is, whenever you heard the glass break, he was coming for that ass. And the glass being his theme song, because if you've ever listened to Stone Cold's theme song, you know what I'm talking about. But the glass shatters and it plays his theme song. So that's where that catchphrase comes from. Stone Cold Steve Austin. As far as, like, I mean, he's not as popular as The Rock, but he's still extremely, extremely popular. And he is still extremely, extremely influential. These two, even though they were technically, you know, competitors, right? They were pretty much on the level playing field with each other in terms of just, you know, fans loving them. Because here we have Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, a charismatic man who everything he does is just must-watch, to a counterpart, the polar opposite, but not really the polar opposite in terms of, you know, people loving him. This redneck, beer-drinking, ass-kicking rattlesnake that gave no flying fucks about anything and anybody in his way, because he was out to beat some ass and to drink some beer. And a lot of people still to this day associate themselves and, you know, think that those two are still the best ever. I'm not going to get into the whole best ever thing in wrestling, because it is a very, very, very large can of worms that I don't really want to open up. It's not like, you know, oh, it's just, you know, it's not really compared to like, oh, you know, Brady's the GOAT in the NFL, or oh, MJ or LeBron is the GOAT in the NBA. No, this is like, you have probably like 8 or 9 or 10 guys even that could potentially be looked at as the GOAT of wrestling. So I'm not going to really get into that here, but maybe for a future episode. Maybe. That could potentially be a future episode. I give you guys like my top 10 wrestlers of all time or something like that. as I take a sip of my agua here, make sure once again to hydrate or dehydrate, especially now more than ever, because hydration is key. But yeah, Stone Cold and The Rock, two of potentially the best wrestlers to ever step foot on the planet, and those were two individuals that really, made the product, made the content they were pumping out must watch because of just how they were imitating their characters on television. And I'm not going to get into all the whole, behind the scenes scripted version. I know that this shit is scripted. I've known that for a long, long time. I'm not going to get into all the behind the scenes stuff as well, because that is, once again, just a whole other can of worms in itself as well. Like, that's the wrestling industry. It is nuts, man. It is just completely insane. And if you don't know about it, it's very hard to, it's just crazy, man. It really is. But yes, anyways, kind of feel like I'm losing you guys here. We're gonna catch you back. Come on back. I know I'm kind of rambling here. Once again, this is all this. I don't have any script here. I'm just saying things. Things are coming out of my mouth, thinking on the fly, which is something I really don't do very well, but I'm doing it well here, kind of. So here we are. We're back. So 2002, 2003. I watched. But I didn't watch it much. And then 2004 came around. I stopped watching for a little while in 2004, I think. I stopped watching. Okay, so with wrestling, there have been periods of time where I'm like, okay, I'm just completely addicted. And then there's this, for whatever reason, the next day, I'm like, all right, no, I'm not. I'm done watching this for some reason. I just lost interest. And that happens several times. That's happened several times in my life. Once again, I stopped watching, I think a little bit after 2004, or maybe no, it was during 2004. So I tuned out for a while, and I didn't really get back into it until 2005 or so, I think, maybe. That is when another individual really started to come on the scene, who I think you guys have probably heard of. You can't really see him very well, but his name is John Cena. John Cena. Once again, I could probably talk about him for days on days, but John Cena, I don't even know where to begin to describe and to talk about him, because he was such a huge, he might have been one of the most, and still is probably one of the most polarizing figures that has ever stepped foot in a wrestling ring, because it was either you absolutely loved him or you absolutely despised him. There was really no in between, because around the time he started to, become popular, he was really popular. He was very, very popular. And then it was pretty obvious what they were trying to do. They were trying to make him into the next Stone Cold or the next Rock. And, with people starting to, get on the internet and all this good stuff, they were all starting to, go against him. And it was either you loved him, and that audience being mostly kids and females, or you hated him, which were probably any male from the age 17 or 18 up, because they hated his guts. And I can see why, because he was just spammed in front of the TV, spammed on every little thing related to wrestling for the better part of like 10 to 15 years. Longer than The Rock and Steve Austin were, because they were on the top, but they weren't on the top for very long. They had a short-lived span. John Cena, though, said, "Hold my beer," and he was on top of wrestling for the better part of over a decade and a half, which is very impressive. But I would say, without a shadow of a doubt, that he was probably my favorite as I was watching as a kid. Just because, I mean, he had a great theme song. I mean, he was a badass. He still is a badass. Once again, he has made himself into even more of a bigger figure outside of wrestling, even though I think he's still... he hasn't retired. He hasn't said he's retired. I think he's still under contract with WWE, but I'm not exactly sure. I'm pretty sure he is. Like, I'm sure they're still sliding him some, checks underneath the table, you know what I'm saying? But he, once again, he was one of my favorites, if not my favorites, around that time period, around 2005, 2006 or so, because that's when he was really starting to become coming of age in front of our eyes and becoming really good and becoming very popular. And then people started to be like, all right, no, we're sick of this guy, fuck him. So then I think around, 2007, 2007, 2008, I think it was around 2009. Like a little bit after, I think, or before, I don't know exactly, but around 2009, that's when I stopped watching wrestling for like a long time. Because I had watched a lot and absorbed a lot up until about 2009. And then like 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 2015, I think is when I started watching a lot again. But for about 5 years or so, I did not watch hardly any wrestling at all. And it's because, started playing more sports, started, do all this other stuff in middle school and early in high school. I just put wrestling kind of in the storage closet. Didn't really touch it at all, really. Didn't, really care too much at all. Didn't really, pay attention to the product whatsoever for about 5 or 6 years. And then I think it was like 2015 or so. 2015, 2014 maybe, I don't know. I think it was 2015. It's when I started really watching a lot again. And I watched a good chunk for about 2 or 3 years. And I think really for the last like 2 or 3 years, I have not watched a whole lot. I really have not. It's because here I am, just on the verge of graduating and everything. Starting to do my own thing. We're doing the podcast. We're doing YouTube. We're doing Twitch. We're doing this, that, the third. And I still very much follow, I follow a lot of wrestlers. I follow a lot of wrestling on, social media. But I don't really watch the product very much. I do like to keep up to date sometimes, but not as much as I once did. Because there's actually, there's the WWE, right? That's the giant of the wrestling industry, and they had a monopoly on the wrestling industry, what it feels like, forever. But now there's this new company called All Elite Wrestling, which is really, really, been catching a lot of steam. It's only been, I think it's been like 2 years now, roughly, a little bit plus or minus 2 years. That's how long it's been, and it's been really challenging and really competing against WWE. So, and it's definitely a breath of fresh air when it comes to, you know, wrestling, because they're wrestling, but it's two totally different products produced way differently from one another. Even though there's some similarities, but there's a lot more differences than there is similarities. But maybe All Elite Wrestling, or AEW as it is short for, maybe that company could potentially bring me back into wrestling like I did and absorbed it as a kid. I don't know exactly. Only time will tell. Only time will tell. So, some other wrestlers that I really, really enjoyed, and that I really, you know, they were just a part of my childhood, essentially. I mean, there were so many wrestlers. Once again, it is just a freaking laundry list of names that have come and gone. But, like, some of the ones that have really, like, you know, that were really influential to me, like a Cena or like a Rock and Austin, were, you know, guys like Shawn Michaels, the Heartbreak Kid. Absolutely loved him. Triple H, time to play the game. He's like the king of wrestling. He's going to be the one that's going to take it into the future. He was the guy that you hated. If you hated anybody when you were a kid, if you watched wrestling, if you hated anybody, you probably hated Triple H, because he did his job well, and he got people to hate his guts because he was a baddie. He was a heel, as they say. Heels, bad guys. But yeah, I hated that motherfucker growing up, because it's just like, oh my god, you win so much and you're a dickhead to everybody. Just fuck you, dude. But that's when you know you've done your job right, and that's what he did. And he's one of the best because of that. And oh god, Triple H. Like he's probably the one that I have probably watched the most of. Yeah, I've watched, you know, him and John Cena are probably like the two guys. Like those two. And then I guess you could say, Shawn Michaels, not as much, but probably those two I've watched like the most of are John Cena and Triple H. Another guy that I really, really, grew up hating as well was Edge. And it's so cool to see that, you know, so the deal with Edge, is that he actually retired from wrestling back in 2011 because he had neck injury. He had neck problems. I mean, that's nothing you want to fuck with at all, especially in wrestling, because you could easily break your neck. And a lot of people have done it, but you can easily do it on any given night. So he had a lot of nagging at neck injuries, and I'm sure concussions as well, building up, and they were like, you know what? Time to call it quits. You don't want to be in a wheelchair for the rest of your life, right? Well, you got to stop risking your life every single night. That is up until last year when he came back. He got cleared by professionals and all that good stuff, and he came back last year. And just last month, actually about 2 weeks ago, he won the Royal Rumble, which is like the biggest, like one of the bigger pay-per-views that they do every year. It's a huge match, one of the best matches every year. Well, it's not technically a match per se, but it's just like one of the biggest spectacle events that they have every year. It's called the Royal Rumble. 30 guys enter it, and you have to throw your guys out of the ring to win. It's basically like the King of the Mountain, essentially. when the last man standing gets a title shot at the biggest show of the half year, which is WrestleMania. But once again, I have not kept up a whole lot with WWE over the last couple of years. I'd say I've kept up more with the other product, AEW, more than WWE because it's a breath of fresh air. It's a cool alternative. But they had Edge, who actually last year tore his meniscus, and he has been on the sideline since last year when he came back from injury after retirement, and they had him win that match. And I was just like, this is so cool because he was like a part of my childhood. Just like with John Cena, just like with Triple H, Shawn Michaels, Edge was one of those guys as well because he was just all over the product as well. He was once again a guy you loved to hate because he was a prick. You hated him. Unless you're Canadian, because he's a Canadian. You probably loved him then, no matter what he did. But, yeah. So that was really cool. I was like, oh my God, this is actually happening. And I mean, this guy was just a part of my childhood. And to see him having success after coming out of retirement for almost 10 years, coming back last year, getting injured again, and then coming back this year again and winning one of the bigger matches they have every year, I just thought that was so cool. I was like, man, the child in me loves this a lot. And I genuinely thought that was really cool and a really sick moment, for wrestling fans to see someone that has been so influential, like so many other individuals has been, go through the ringer, go through all these, bad things happening in their life, and to have the success that they have, and basically their second life, and their second opportunity, their second rebirth here in the business. So I thought that was really cool. So yeah, Edge, another guy who I just absolutely love. The Undertaker, one of the most iconic wrestlers of all time. Once again, could be argued that he could be the best because he had been in the business for over 30 years, which is nuts. Undertaker, Chris Jericho, who once again could do a whole podcast on just him. But he is still going strong today. He is now a part of the All Elite Wrestling company, and he is still going strong. He's he's almost 50 years old, I think. I think he's 50 years old, if I'm not mistaken. He's old as fuck. He's been in the industry for a long time. He is one of the best ever. He self-proclaims himself as the GOAT. And I mean, it's kind of hard to argue with it, but once again, so there's a lot of GOATs in wrestling. There really is. But yeah, Chris Jericho was one of those guys. The Hardy Boys. Those were the girls. If you were a girl watching wrestling, you probably loved those guys because those guys were just death-defying, and they're still going strong today as well. The Hardy Boys, Kurt Angle, just an absolute legend. Kurt Angle, actual amateur wrestler, won an Olympic gold medal with a broken freaking neck. That is true. He had a broken neck and won a fucking gold medal with it back in the 1996 Olympics. He trained to become a professional wrestler. He was one of the most badass mofos ever. One of the best ever as well. Another one that was really influential to me was him. Let's see. Goldberg, another one that was really, I was a huge Goldberg stan just because I thought he was just so badass. Rob Van Dam, the man, the 5-star frog splash, doing it at the pool, that was because of him. Eddie Guerrero, rest in peace. He passed away back in 2005. He was one of the best ever. And of course, there's some female performers too, like, Trish Stratus, Lita, Molly Holly. I mean, once again, guys, I mean, you could tell I'm like, there was just so much. There were so many just amazing, amazing wrestlers. And there still is today, don't get me wrong. But there have just been so many influential people, at least in my eyes, watching wrestling, that it's just like every time I could talk about them, I just geek out because it's like, oh my God, like I'm reliving my childhood. I'm reliving what I absorbed as a kid and what I watched so much of growing up. And, once again, if I could talk about this for hours on end, I would, but we are coming up here on an hour on this episode, and it just feels like I could keep talking for 10 more days. It really honestly could, because there's just so much of wrestling that there is to talk about, and I could talk about, but I'm not going to today because we're just about to wrap things up. We are just about to wrap things up. So, yes, wrestling was a monumental influence on me as a kid and growing up. That's pretty much, once again, one of the only 3 or 4 things that I watched. I've been to a few wrestling events. The last one that I was at was, I think, a couple summers ago. There was an event up in Sioux Falls that happened. And I've been to a few others here and there. Obviously, with COVID, there hasn't really been a wrestling show and just like that fans can go to in over a year. Like, that's how crazy it is, influenced, and how crazy it has changed the wrestling business, because like the fans are like the essence of wrestling, like they really are. And once again, imagine like a 30-foot rock. We maybe only grazed 0.000001 inches of that rock with what I have talked about. And that's no pun intended, by the way. No pun intended to the rock. But that's about how much we talked about. Because once again, there's just so much shit that I could talk about with the wrestling business. Honestly, I could probably start a separate podcast on just talking about wrestling. That's not what I'm gonna do though, because I don't want to overload myself. But that's just how much wrestling is injected into my veins. It is engraved in my memory. It is in my heart and my soul forever. And I will always forever be proud of being a wrestling fan. I'm super excited for what the wrestling business has, in store as it unfolds in front of our eyes. And they've been doing a phenomenal job of putting on shows during the pandemic, because like it never stopped. Yeah, the whole world stopped, but the wrestling world really never has stopped. It really hasn't. Obviously, they have had to like evolve into, not having as many fans there. Like the WWE, for example, they have a, I think they're using Tropicana Field in Tampa right now to have like a virtual arena. So they have people zoom in, and they have like thousands of these screens like popped up of these fans that are there. Like, that's really cool. I think AEW, the other product, they're having limited fans there, but they've been having their shows in one like section. They've been having their shows in one stadium literally for almost a year now. So it'll be very exciting to see. Hopefully the wrestling industry gets back to the way it was, because they're doing shows in towns every night. Every night. So they were, but now they aren't, obviously. So, goddamn, that went by quick. Holy shit! Once again, it's just like I could talk for days. I've been saying that constantly. I've been spamming that to you guys constantly this episode, but that's what I just feel like. But I'm going to call it quits here. I am going to wrap things up here. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed tuning in. Once again, hopefully turn that frown upside down. Hopefully turn that negative into a positive. And hopefully you guys are having a better day now as a result. I'm not sure what we'll talk about on the next episode of the podcast, which will be unlucky number 13. Or it will be lucky 13 in our case. It will be lucky number 13. But I will be thinking. I'll come up with some ideas. Maybe we talk about wrestling again. I don't know. I keep saying this as well. There will be a guest coming to the show soon. Just need to pull some strings. Need to get scheduling conflicts figured out. And there will be guests coming to the show shortly. That's when I think the show will take the next step into becoming what I had set out for it to be from the get-go, and that is to be a very elite podcast. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you guys so much for your support. If you have watched all the episodes leading up to this, you are greatly appreciated. I cannot thank you enough. We are only just getting things started. Not only with the podcast, but once again with the streaming grind, with the YouTube grind, all this good stuff. It's only just beginning. It's only just beginning to become what I hope and what I envision it to become. So, thank you guys so much for watching. This has been episode number 12 of the Stealing Your Time podcast here on YouTube, SoundCloud, and Spotify. I am Shawn. And until episode number 13, I'm signing out.